Hello everybody, I'm Jerome Moore, host of Deep Conversations, and today's guest, we have the wonderful, the amazing, the beautiful outside and inside, Jackie Sims. Jackie, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Jerome, I'm doing good.
It's good to have you here. I'm excited about this conversation. You're originally from Philadelphia, Philly.
West Philadelphia.
West Philadelphia.
Born and raised.
To be specific, West. So are there any other people that we may know about that comes out of West Philadelphia? Because there's a lot of people we know that come from Philadelphia, but what about West Philadelphia, outside of yourself?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Who else? I don't think PATHE LaBelle was West Philly. Off the top of my head, no. I can't think
just
of
the
who's...
great Jackie Sims.
Yeah.
Speaking of PATHE LaBelle, did you hear about the verses between PATHE LaBelle and Gladys?
No.
They had like a verses. So this is this whole thing. They do like versus battles where they have like some legendary artists go song for song, and this is like good, like just good vibes, good energy, and they talk about some of the history. So that was a good like home cooking.
Okay.
Versus battle.
Yeah, Patty loves her food scene. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Is Patty the one with the sweet pie, sweet potato pies?
Yes.
I'm a chess pie person personally. I ain't a sweet potato pie. But West Philadelphia, how was it growing up in West Philadelphia?
It was awesome. West Philadelphia period was a city that probably had more black homeowners than any other city in the country at one time. Okay. So everybody I knew in Philly owned a home. You know, everybody was a two-parent family. Okay. Parents working. We would definitely be considered maybe more lower to middle, because when I was coming up, the community was filled with your teachers, your postmen, the trash man, everybody we all lived together amongst one another. You know, my father was a law enforcement officer, my mother worked for GE, so we had a good life back in the day when I was growing up in Philadelphia.
And what was the time period?
I started elementary school in 1958.
1958.
Yes.
Okay. Very young, very young. So
seasoned,
yeah, right. Yeah. Seasoned, experienced. So during that time in West Philadelphia, you mentioned just the community, the employment. When did you realize like a shift, I guess? Well,
I didn't realize. My parents made the decision in '74 that they were going to move out of Philadelphia, and my sisters and I had two sisters. We were horrified because we loved Philadelphia. We loved the culture, the food, the music, friends, family. Philadelphia is what we knew. And then when we heard we were moving to South Carolina, where we used to visit once a year because we have family in South Carolina, we were really horrified then. So, but my parents saw what was about to be a huge wave that was about to hit the city. So they sold their home when they could get, maximum amount of money. And my father had a job that took him south. And I think I was 18. I think it was 18 or 19 when we moved to South Carolina.
So how was that leaving, East Coast?
Culture shock.
So what was it like? So, because we know, we understand the South it was different. It's a little different.
Yeah.
And so being 18 years old, you could definitely at that age like, oh, this is, different times, different environment, especially in South Carolina specifically. So what were kind of the biggest differences you noticed and possibly had to adapt to? As a black woman, young woman? Well,
first of all, I lived in the urban core of Philadelphia in West Philly. So there was no place you could not get to by bus or subway or L or trolley.
Right.
My parents bought a nice little house on a dirt road. So that was the first thing that went wrong.
No concrete.
No concrete. We were on a dirt road. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I love jazz. I started appreciating jazz at about 14 years old. No jazz. I couldn't even get what I felt was a decent R&B station back then.
Right.
And then there was the food. You grew up in Philadelphia, you are a bona fide foodie. You have no choice.
What's the best food? What you talking about?
The first thing I missed was a really good pizza.
Okay.
They didn't exist in the South. I don't care what nobody says. They didn't exist.
You're supposed to know.
And there were no Jewish delicatessen, so I missed my pastrami on rye with the pickle out the barrel. Philadelphia had an amazing Chinatown. No Chinatown down south.
No.
So it was,
No.
I think that was one of the greater disappointments,
Right.
missing all the amazing food that Philly has to offer and the culture,
Right.
you know.
Right. So now, are you telling me, are you saying that East Coast has better food than the South?
You gotta understand, everybody from the South, I mean, everybody in Philly was from Georgia,
right.
South Carolina,
Right.
Virginia.
Right.
So we were eating the same food.
Right,
You know,
okay.
I grew up eating chitlins and you know, the
right.
whole 9 yards.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm a chillin' eater myself.
Yeah,
Real
well, I don't
country.
touch them now, but you know, my daddy made them every New Year's.
Ah, yeah, that's New Year's, Christmas. You got
Yeah.
how Thanksgiving. You only gonna have them once, maybe if you're lucky.
Once a year, that's all we have.
Twice, if you're lucky. But maybe if you're lucky, maybe once a year, like you said.
Yeah, once a year.
That cleaning and who don't nobody want to do that.
No, we left the house. We would go to the movies 'cause you could see a double movie back then.
And so, yeah, ain't no double movie now.
Nah.
Barely one
No.
now. So, from West Philly to South Carolina, what would your friends say about you growing up, like in either city, West Philadelphia or South Carolina, like a young Jackie?
Well, in Philadelphia, I think a lot of friends would be shocked that I have acclimated so well to the South. I love the South. I really didn't build relationships in South Carolina until I was on the other side of early 30s, because I was in undergrad and graduate school in Huntsville, Alabama.
Okay.
So I lived in Alabama, in Huntsville, for 10 years, and then I came back to South Carolina, and I was in graduate school then, got married, children, and stayed in South Carolina for 25 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
What? So one would say you like South Carolina for stayed there for 25 years.
Well, I was there whether I liked it or not. Yeah.
Well, how was your time in Huntsville, Alabama?
Huntsville was interesting. Huntsville was completely concentrated around the undergraduate school that I went to, which was Oakwood University. I was raised a Seventh-day Adventist.
Okay.
And then I went to Alabama A&M for grad school.
Okay.
So my life basically existed on one campus or the other. Although I
Okay.
lived off campus, I really didn't get into Huntsville,
Right.
itself, the city.
Right.
Yeah.
What life changes, experiences did you have or did you encounter that helped you grow as a person during those times in Huntsville, if any?
Huntsville was, this is kind of sad to say, but Huntsville really began to teach me about racism. Because growing up in Philadelphia.
Not Huntsville, Alabama.
Huntsville, Alabama,
No,
man.
not Alabama. Teach you about race? No
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, because Philadelphia is very separate.
Right.
Everybody lives in their own community. Italians live here, black folks live here, upper middle class people live somewhere you don't even know where they are.
Right.
Irish live here. So everybody had their spot. And,
Right.
and those are the people that you interacted with on a daily basis, except if you went downtown to shop.
Right.
Right. Huntsville, I remember one day I was walking down a main thoroughfare, and I think I was going to the mall, and a car drove up close to me and bombed me with some raw eggs.
What?
I thought I had been shot.
Wow.
And I was, I was like horrified, and I really couldn't understand why that happened.
Right.
When I went back to campus and talked to one of my professors, he began to give me a education real quick.
Right.
And by the time I got to my junior year, we started going to Atlanta.
Right.
And we would drive on those back roads going through Scottsboro,
Right.
and Rome, Georgia. And we also got an education on how careful we needed to be driving through those back roads. I never told my parents that I went through those back roads to get to Atlanta. And that was like 73.
Wow.
So Atlanta was just really integrating,
Right.
you know, the school system and a lot of things. But growing up Adventist, I also went to a Seventh-day Adventist boarding academy.
Okay.
And we lived on campus.
Okay.
And we were all black.
Right.
And then going to an all black university, which Oakwood was.
Right.
And growing up in Philadelphia, West Philly, which was predominantly black, at least my community, I didn't have a lot of interaction with white folk.
Right.
I just really didn't.
Right.
And families that migrated from the South and went north, like my grandpa would never talk about the South.
Right.
And he swore he would never go back there again. He was raised in Aiken. And my dad came from Union County, South Carolina, which is right outside of Spartanburg County, where I lived for 25 years. So people, I don't know whether that, I personally don't think it was a good thing, but they didn't want to talk about their experiences down south. Please join us for Deep Dish Conversations. Follow us on Instagram and YouTube, and please check out Gino's Pizza.
So how did you do a lot, so how did you get from where you started to where you are now? What is that story?
Okay, well, I jokingly tell people that the Lord threw me out of South Carolina.
Okay.
All doors just slammed shut in my face. And one thing that I still pray to this day, you know, if I'm traveling down the wrong road or I'm doing the wrong thing, Lord, stop me, because you know how I am.
Right.
You know, I'll keep going and keep doing it. I have workaholic tendencies in me. So I came to to Tennessee from South Carolina because I had family here. My sons were both at Fisk.
Okay.
My mom and dad were here, and my sister, she'd been here since 1992.
Okay.
So she was well established in the community. And they had been wanting us to move anyway, so I packed my daughters up and cats and dogs. And we came to Nashville in 2008.
Okay.
And I had no job or no home. When I registered my daughter in school, I realized that I was legally homeless, you know, because I was living with family and I wasn't working. So I'm like, wow, I'm homeless, okay. One of the things I did early on was go to, it used to be Kijiji's, I hear, but Phyllis Hildreth had turned it into another kind of eatery place on Jefferson. And they had a coffee club meeting on Thursday mornings, networking. I said, well, this is how I'm going to learn about Nashville. I'm going to network.
Right.
I knew how to network like a fat rat in South Carolina.
Right.
That was a part of my job. So I just started meeting people and collecting cards and talking to folks, asking questions. And after that, it was time for me to start volunteering.
Right.
So I started to volunteer. And my prayer was to open the right door for me, because I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't want to practice again as a mental health professional, because for me, because of some experiences I had in South Carolina, that would be a burden. It was a burden I didn't want to take on. Other people's stuff. I didn't want to deal with other people's stuff. Not that way.
Right.
And so, and I was just waiting for the right door to open, volunteering. And I started out with sharing her to Jump.
Okay.
Because she came to the coffee club meetings a lot, got to know her. And because of where her office was, I soon met Keith Caldwell.
Okay.
And then I got involved with Tennessee Alliance for Progress. And the whole time I was meeting people, I was learning because I had never been in like the organizing community where people are doing social justice stuff. That was new to me. I only organized with government entities and nonprofits, and we did all our collaborating around crime victimization. That's the population I serve, victims of violent crime. And so I was meeting a whole new bunch of folk doing stuff that was interesting, exciting, but it was really foreign to me. And then Keith introduced me to Dr. Lawson, Dr. James Lawson. And I knew then that my whole life was going to change. And that I had found the work that I was going to do, this organizing thing, you know. And so I sat under Dr. Lawson for a solid year, and I literally began to redefine myself as a Christian through this work in community with and for my brothers and sisters. And so Christianity looked different to me. It was no longer about sitting in pews, you know, and showing up looking cute, you know, and then going home and back to business as usual. I knew that I was going to have a life of service, and it was going to require sacrifice, and I was ready to make the sacrifice. So for the first 5 years, although I was in and out of a few nonprofits trying to get a good feel for the city, most of my work was volunteer work. But I strongly depended on the Lord to sustain me because I knew this is where He put me. So, you know, my feelings were, well, if this is what you want me to do, you know, you are my only partner and you have to take care of me and my kids. And He was faithful, absolutely, completely faithful. So,
what was the biggest challenges, hurdles like during that time?
You know, there weren't just the learning. You know, I was learning so much that was new to me. I remember when I met Clemmy Greenlee, and this is when I was kind of canvassing on my own, not under any organization's umbrella, just on my own, because she was telling me about how a part of North Nashville used to be between Buchanan and Clay, and specifically around Cephas, and you know, she told me about her son, and you know how she lost her son, and what her life was like before she got into organizing. And that was such a rich relationship for me. And it helped me realize just how much I had been changed. Because in my early life, I was a snob with a capital S-N-U-B, you know. It was how I was reared. Well, it's not that my parents wanted me to be a snob, but it was the people that I was in proximity to, and I ended up being that way. So, you know, the Lord had a lot of humbling to do with Jackie. And I, you know, as I met people that came from a different world than what I grew up in, it was so refreshing. And I just felt myself growing and evolving and becoming a better human being, you know, constantly becoming a better human being. And service became such a joy, even when it was hard, you know, because I wasn't a young thing out in the street, you know. Fortunately, I was in reasonably good health, and, you know, I could do all the things I needed to do. So it became important to me to touch each of the areas where I saw people suffering the most, you know, which is why I spent a year at Open Table, I thought that work was going to kill me. Chased around behind homeless people in the middle of the night,
right.
you know, trying to make sure they're okay.
Right.
So that work was very physical. I think that was the hardest job I've ever done.
Wow.
And I had to remove myself from that for
Right.
my own safety.
Right.
But I still have a deep affinity for the homeless
Right.
population. And I remember when I came to Nashville, I was legally homeless.
Right.
So criminal justice issues became extremely important to me. I worked on the other sides of the system as a victim advocate.
Right.
I found myself on the reentry side, which was so much more gratifying and so much more eye-opening. And reentry began to really reveal to me what America really was and what it was not. It was not the land of the home, you know,
Right.
it was beautiful, free, but it was none of that shit, none of it.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, you know. I even took two people into my home who were homeless to help them get on their feet.
Right.
One did very well and one didn't, so
Right.
no telling what became of the one who didn't.
50%.
Yeah, but the one who did, when I tell you that was one of the best educations I ever had in my life, living with a person who had been in prison for 27 years and then thrown out into the street.
Right.
He became an alcoholic because he never drank. You know,
Right.
he just never drank. But homelessness, I imagine, will drive you to drinking.
Right.
But I learned so much about me
Right.
just watching him and trying to, you know, allow the Lord to use me to get him in a better place. And I personally, as I watched him evolve as a Christian, I began to feel kind of embarrassed about my own Christianity because I saw things in his transition that where I had yet not grown.
Right.
And that was very humbling. So wanting to understand the work that I was doing, working at Neighborhood Resource Center and watching District 5,
Right.
Scott Davis was the councilman, and watching that district flip. You know, I knew a ton of black folk in District 5, still do.
Right.
But watching young white gentrifiers come in and with the attitudes that they came in with, and watching how that neighborhood shifted left a very bad taste in my mouth. And watching government do nothing, not caring a rip.
Really?
About
The government didn't do anything?
not giving a rip.
Really?
You know? Yeah. So I don't know. This is, you know, the more I learn, the more I want to learn. The more I experience, the more I want to experience.
What brings you the most joy about doing the work that you do in organizing?
Just being useful. You know, my continuous prayer is, Lord, put me to use.
Right.
You know, whatever gifts, whatever talents, whatever strengths, whatever you gave to me, you didn't give it to me for just because.
Right,
You know,
right.
I live and breathe on planet Earth. You
Right.
gave it to me to use. So
Right.
show me how to use it.
So what's the next steps for you in the community as far as organizing, next big project? Where do you see yourself being useful in going forward?
Well, I've gathered a lot of expertise in housing
Okay.
as lead organizer with PATHE.
Right.
And I'm going to continue to grow that and hopefully help change in any small way the housing crisis that does exist here in Nashville, especially for people of color. And working with the Nashville People's Budget Alliance, they're a very radical group. And what I'm finding is I'm far more radical than I realized. I've always been someone that kind of went against the grain.
Rebel.
Yeah, I guess that's always been in me.
Right.
You know, that's just who I am. So I understand where the young adults that I work very closely with are coming from.
Right.
And I try to, I don't want to be that older person that thinks they know everything, because I don't.
Right.
I'm the first person to say that I don't. But I try to be that person now that can offer some wisdom, because I do think that is one of my strengths.
Okay.
I do have wisdom. And I do my own research. You know, I have an ample amount of intellectual curiosity, so I'm always searching and digging.
Right. Finding out new things.
Always, always. I love learning.
Right.
I love growth.
Right.
If you're not growing, you're dying.
Right.
There's no stagnant, you know, stay stuck in one place.
Right.
So I try to use everything that I've been given to provide some guidance. Sometimes I have to do more than guidance, like I told you about the workshop.
Right.
I had to very diplomatically take it over.
Right.
Because they were like, "Oh Lord, help!
Right.
You know, I gotta do something here."
Right. Right.
So I just trying to be useful.
Right.
You know, in this organizing space, and using the benefit of all the decades that I've been on planet Earth, the experiences that I've had, the good, bad, and ugly.
Right.
I could never be in a position to judge another person.
Right.
You know, as a mental health professional, I understand a lot about why people do the things they do. And, you know, so for as long as I'm living and breathing and I can get these 2 legs and 2 feet going, and my brain still works, you know, I'm going to keep, I hope I will keep growing.
How can people contact you if they want to get involved in the thousands of things that you're doing here in Nashville? How can people contact you? What is the best information to get in touch with you? Or
best thing is just to take my regular Gmail, because I use that most of the time anyway. And that's Jackie Paul Sims. I'm a 1M Sims at gmail.com.
Twitter, Facebook.
I'm trying to I have a
Stick to the
Twitter page,
stick to the
but
Gmail.
I don't. Yeah, stick to the Gmail, or you can text me 615-679-8388. I always, you know, respond to my texts, and I always respond to, you know, my Gmail.
Okay.
I peep at my Facebook, and then I get off. My Twitter even less, and I don't do Instagram at all. But my daughter said she's going to get me there. But my fear, it will take up my precious time and lessen the things that I deem more valuable.
Well, that's Jackie Sims. I appreciate your time, Jackie. You enjoy the pizza?
Yes, absolutely.